For more perspective, let's bring in Gabriel Wildau. He is Managing Director at Teneo Political Risk, where he focuses on risk analysis in China. He's also the former Shanghai Bureau Chief for the Financial Times. Gabriel, great to have you with us. And as we sort of digest all of the geopolitical drama at hand, what lasting impact, if any, could this visit by the speaker to Taiwan have on that very key relationship between China and the U.S. at this moment?
Thanks. Well, I think we have to view this visit by Speaker Pelosi as part of a broader pattern of what Beijing sees as really an erosion of Washington's commitment to the One China policy. So I think in a different context where the One China policy appeared to be stable, this visit might have been less of an irritant for Beijing, but instead they see it as part of a pattern. And I think the risk is that this pattern continues and it sparks off a cycle of responses that could last for many months. If we look at the last big Taiwan crisis in 1995-96, there were military exercises for 9 months. So while I don't think we're headed for a war scenario, we could be headed for an extended period of instability.
And Gabe, how much of an upending is that for economic ties here? We were just looking at maps of how many cargo ships. I mean, I think about half of all the trade that goes by sea through the Taiwan Strait comes via, if you're going from China to Japan on the way to the west, goes through the Taiwan Strait. It's crucial for supply chains. It's also crucial for the chip sector, for example. Does this have business implications, do you think?
I think any kind of trade blockade by either side is really going to be a last resort. It would be regarded as an act of war. And we've seen really throughout the deterioration of U.S. China tensions over the last few years that China has tried, for the most part, to resist decoupling. Although they're trying to increase their own resilience against Western sanctions and export controls, they view their strength as maintaining a crucial place in global supply chains. And so any move by the Chinese to disrupt trade, I think, would end up being a self-inflicted wound. I think they're going to look for other ways, whether it's military exercises, whether it's targeted sanctions against Taiwanese companies, to make a show of force, to demonstrate their unhappiness without shooting themselves in the foot.
What is the goal of this? Is this about U.S. China going head to head? We had someone on earlier saying that China and Russia, of course, getting closer and closer together. Was this about Taiwan? Is this about democracy, TSMC, the chip makers, as you mentioned, the supply chains? What do you really see here as the issue?
I think it's a bit of everything you just mentioned, but I think at the core is a fundamental clash of interests between the U.S. and China, where China sees Taiwan as part of its sovereign territory, and the U.S. increasingly sees Taiwan as a linchpin in its Asian regional security strategy. And it also sees Taiwan as a kind of bulwark against global authoritarianism, much as it sees Ukraine. And indeed, we see the Biden administration talking about China and competition with China increasingly in terms of ideological competition or competition of values. And so that really is an example of the change I mentioned earlier, where the kind of version 1.0 of the One China policy struck, in the late 1970s, early 80s. The U.S. was ostensibly kind of indifferent to the status of Taiwan so long as the issue was resolved peacefully. And now we see an evolution of the One China policy towards a kind of affirmative U.S. interest in keeping Taiwan separate. And I think that is what Beijing views as an irritant. And if those trends continue, we're likely to see more conflicts.
Gabriel Wildau, great to have some time with you. Thank you, Managing Director at Teneo Political Risk.